Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
It's really great to see everybody here. Welcome to the Research Administrators Forum. I want to start out, as we always do, since we only meet quarterly, there are usually people who have joined our community over the past few months. And so starting with the people who are in the room, is there anyone who would like to introduce themselves, who are new to the community, or someone who would like to introduce somebody who is new to the community? Yes.
Hello, my name is Stephen Cooley. I am a research navigator with the Office of the Vice President for Research. I'll be working with OSP, and it's nice to be here.
And you started this week, right?
I started last Monday.
Last Monday.
Yes.
Okay. Welcome.
Thank you.
Great to
Hi,
have you.
Stephen.
Gareth.
I have Ryan Babcock, who just joined our postdoc team from School of Medicine. I don't see him here.
He's on.
He's up.
Is online?
He's on the screen.
Hi, Ryan.
Stand up.
Yes.
We just, and I've just hired a new grants and contract specialist. She's on Zoom because she lives in Georgia. Her name is Antoinette Ford. So we're super excited to have her join us.
Great. Thank you. Welcome. I'm not sure if I should be looking there. If they can see me. Anybody else? Yes.
Hi, Vita Castellani just joined radiology medical imaging. She's she hails from Anchorage, Alaska.
Wow.
Oh.
Which is where our keynote speaker is doing research. So anybody? Yeah, Bill.
I think you've been introduced before, but you're here in person this time, so.
Randall Scott, pleasure to meet you. I'm actually moving back to Charlottesville after about a 10-year hiatus, so nice to meet you.
Contract negotiator with those.
Hi.
Erica.
We brought on Marina Muchnik to the VPR training team, and she's going to be doing the Human Research Protection Program training.
Terrific.
Nice.
Bill.
On the OSP pre-award side, Chelsea Blakely joining us as a grants administrator. And I know he was technically started the day of the last RAF, but our outgoing subs manager, Simon Butcher, as well.
Anybody else? All right. Well, thanks. And again, we are a growing, dynamic community. Welcome to the hardest job you'll ever love. And we look forward to working with all of you. We're going to kick things off this morning with an update on grand challenges and strategic research infrastructure investment update from Catherine Bradshaw. Catherine is a university professor and senior associate dean with the School of Education and Human Development, and she's also a senior faculty fellow for the Vice President for Research. Catherine Bradshaw.
Great. Well, thank you so much for inviting me here today. So I bring greetings on behalf of Megan Barnett, who is the Vice Provost for the Academic Initiatives, and our Interim Vice President for Research, Fred Epstein. They are sorry they weren't able to join you here today, but we were very eager to share out some updates on these two initiatives. So you got me. And I was here about 9 or 10 months ago to share some findings from a big survey we did related to the SRII, which is always a little bit of a stumbling block when we talk about that, but that's the Strategic Research Investment Initiative. And so around infrastructure, and so that's what one of the I's actually stands for. And so that's one of the updates that I will give. But since it's very tightly coupled with the grand challenges, I wanted to bring a broader update on these two initiatives. And Kelly is going to be following me since she just came in. Give a wave here. And Kelly's going to give the kind of deeper dive about the investments in OSP and sponsor research. So any of the details related to those types of hires and initiative investments, Kelly will follow up more specifically after I conclude my broader kind of update here. So just giving a heads up. So I'm really excited to share some updates that come out of this office here. So starting off with grand challenges. So the grand challenge refers to more generally some of the great and good investments that happen through the 2030 plan that were articulated through the strategic plan that the university developed a few years ago. And so this is President Ryan's strategic plan for the university. I actually served on the strategic planning committee, so I seem to be at the front lines of a lot of these great opportunities. And so this was not just related to research, although we tend to highlight it as it relates to the research mission, but there are lots of great initiatives, including how we can be a good neighbor, how we can invest in staff, and how we can do great things for our students. But as we talk in this conversation here today, I'll just mostly focus on the research-related initiatives that come out of it. And that includes these 5 grand challenge initiatives. But I encourage you to take a look at the 2030 plan because it comes up a lot when President Ryan is talking and when we talk about initiatives across grounds, a lot of which are related to staff and improving the quality of staff life. And so as many of you are staff members, good for you to take a look at that. But these are really important things as we talk about initiatives for hiring faculty and investments for students more generally. So these are the 5 grand challenges that are often referred to, many of which had kind of gotten off the ground even before the current articulation of the institutes. And so they are listed here. But in the most recent iteration, we're going to focus on the institutes as we know them now. And so what happened in 2022, there were conversations that happened amongst the deans. The deans went back to their faculty and said, hey, let's take another look at these. Let's develop some white papers, go back and talk to your faculty. What are initiatives that are happening within your schools that are really important as we think about those 5 grand challenges? Develop consultation and white papers, and then there were a series of meetings, some of which happened in the rotunda, some of which happened over at the Boar's Head, and brought forward a series of ideas under those 5 big themes that were articulated there. Should we do additional cluster hires and thematic investments in these areas and additional investments in institutes? And then we brought forward a series in 2023, a relaunch of the institutes as we know them now. And so here we are, into the spring and a launch of additional institute investments onto what we know now, the Democracy Institute. So there was already a Democracy Institute, and then it got additional funding from Karsh and a kind of a relaunch of the institute. So there was already an institute and it got rebranded with the additional investment for Karsh. So these were institutes that were already set up and then they got bundled with additional, like the Miller Center was kind of brought together under that. So lots of great work that was going on in democracy, additional investments and hires that were happening already, and additional work in that area, the environmental resiliency and sustainability, reinvestments in that, and particular focus in the area of climate change and solutions, the brain and neuroscience reauthorization and kind of reinvestments in that area, and neuroscience and kind of double down work in that area, particular focus in Alzheimer's, autism, and other brain-related research. And then a focus into new areas. They were already articulated under their 2030 plan, but there was work that needed to be done to figure out what did we actually want to do in the area of digital technology and society, and what did we want to do under precision medicine and precision health. And so that was the launch of these 2 new initiatives under that space, because we didn't have institutes that were formally launched in that. So these were the 2 new institutes that were formulated recently. But rather than calling them institutes, because we had to figure this out, they're called initiatives, so kind of a baby launch in this space while we figure this out. So these are the 2 new ones that are articulated in the box here. And for example, as we think about what do we want to do in digital technology and getting some additional lift with the Democracy Initiative, that was tethered a little bit with the work that's going on in democracy and Karsh. Seems like a really good idea. And then they also partnered a bit with what's happening under digital technology and development, around youth development, and they have been launched with Nancy Deutsch and Bethany Teachman, some of my good friends and colleagues, and also partnered up with some of the work that's happening in the youth health and mental health space. And so that has just actually launched in January. And so there's lots of exciting work that's happening in that space and lots of opportunity to partner with faculty. So they're just getting launched in the digital tech and youth development and innovation space. So under precision medicine and precision health, I'm actually part of this. This is actually led by Karen Ingersoll and has a focus on cancer and youth mental health and health equity. And so Karen Ingersoll is the director of this, and then there are sub-directors around cancer and youth mental health. And so I'm part of the youth mental health, and then there's equity director. And we have a big boost by the launch of the Manning Biotech Institute. And so this is very serendipitous that we have great partnership with the Manning Biotech Institute, which just broke ground in December. Great opportunity for UVA to get a great lift and partner with the state through the initiatives that are going to be getting launched in this space. We're currently doing a search for a director in this, and there's going to be great private partnerships in this space, and the clinical trials work that's going to happen, translational work and commercialization, $250 million investment in this space, the $100 million gift from the Mannings, and then about $100 million investment from the state, as well as the governor, additional fundraising to come through this work. So lots of great excitement. This will be based in the Fontaine Research Park. So there are also additional investments in cores. So this is a little bit of a crossover between the grand challenges and the strategic research initiatives and investments in infrastructure. And so one of those is the clinical data warehouse. And so this is in partnership with the School of Medicine, making anonymized patient data such as EPIC available for research projects and collaborative research and other types of university-wide researchers. So these are opportunities for us to leverage the clinical data in a safe and secure cloud-based solution. There's another core that's being led by Don Brown. It's currently labeled Health Data Enclave, but they're considering changing it to actually be a research data enclave because it could use other types of data, not just health, such as sensor data or wearable data collection. So this is leveraging the great work of iThrive, which is currently in a competing renewal. So this is a wonderful opportunity for other types of data to be made available for research partnerships. And the clinical trials core, and this is led by Linda Duska, based in the School of Medicine, but available to faculty across grounds. They are currently developing out and doing more hires in this space, and the fabulous Lori Elder is working on this and doing additional hires for a launch that will be prepared for, I believe, in early May. I'm very excited about the work that they are doing in this space. And the digital technology core that is going to be led by Laura Barnes and will be available to faculty across grounds to get services and supports for app development, wearable technologies, and other technologies to get additional support in AI and machine learning for research. And as I have mentioned, two of those new grand challenges in particular use tech-based applications. And so having additional solutions for faculty to access services and supports around technology would be a great core. And so that's a wonderful opportunity for faculty. And we can't forget about the great work that Josh Baller is doing in the Data Analytics Center, which is off and running now since October. And many faculty have been involved in the development of the Data Analytics Center, and that is open for business. And so they have been working very hard for that launch. So turning now specifically to the strategic research infrastructure, just in terms of a step back about what the purpose of the infrastructure. So as compared to the 2030 plan, we were thinking a bit thematically about those 5 areas and building off the strategic plan. There was also an intent to understand what kind of supports and investments do we need to build our infrastructure to make sure we are well positioned to secure external funding. that we're well positioned to ensure that we're able to make great discoveries and that we're able to translate those great discoveries for a broad impact. And so our goal was to develop a prioritized list of infrastructure investments that we could realize in the short term, such as within the first 3 years, as well as position UVA to be successful for longer term investments, especially to be realized ideally within the first 7 years, but also over a period of 10 years or so. So we had a series of questions. What do we need to move the needle? What kind of investments do we need to achieve our goals? And are there potential barriers that are prohibiting us from meeting those kind of goals, like policy changes or other kinds of obstacles? This was the timeline. So we kicked it off in August of 2022. So this is pretty well aligned with where we were on those kind of grand challenges. So these things were happening simultaneously. While we were articulating the investments thematically, we were also thinking about infrastructure type of investments. So we had a steering committee. We were also hiring an external consulting firm by the name of Manat that was helping us do some internal review of our own data as well as some external benchmarking. And we had an internal working group, a steering committee, and then we had a larger group of faculty and staff that were weighing in on the process. We reviewed all of this great data, and then we shared our report back to the executive sponsors that were Ian Baucom as well as President Ryan. And then they reviewed that, and the implementation process has begun this fall. And in fact, there's some folks of you in the room that were hired as a result of this. I'm so excited. I feel like a Muppet. This is like, it happened. So, inputs to the process. The steering committee was formulated based on 20 people, and I chaired that. So I do feel like I birthed this process. So I'm glad to have some result as a result. And there was baseline assessment, the benchmarking, as I mentioned, the working group, and then we had 8 wonderful subject matter experts, many of whom are in the room here today. The great Cheryl Wagner is here. Put a hand up. Thank you. Wonderful feedback sessions. Many of you contributed to that. And then we had a survey. I shared those results with you, and many of you contributed to that process. And Nate Hickson did the wonderful analysis and review and shared some of those results. So thank you. I'm all about a team science and a collaboration. This is a great team effort to do this work. And so we had the phase that we have done this great work, reported out, and now we are in the action and implementation phase. So, and on top of all this, we're searching for a new VPR. So Ram has moved on to upstate New York to the SUNY system. And so now we have a fantastic interim VPR. Fred Epstein was very gracious and generous to step in as interim VPR. I'm chairing the VPR search right now. So we are hopeful and optimistic to have a permanent VPR in place this spring/summer, who will continue the charge around implementation. And I can't believe I see that number on the right-hand side, fiscal year 31-33. But I guess that's the phase 3 of this whole thing. Hold your breath. Here we go. But we got, a lot of work to do right here in the near term. And there's a lot of great work that's happening now. So we are well into the implementation, and it's very exciting to see all this great work that's happening. So while it's taken a little while to get our communication strategy, there's already been a lot of great work that's happening. So Kelly's going to share out in greater detail the research administration staff and systems investments that are happening. I'm going to highlight a couple of these other buckets, and I've already shared a little bit around the research core, but I will just share a little bit. So as I mentioned, there are a lot of investments that are already happening, and I think this is an important part of our communications, that there's a lot of great work that's already happening, and we need to really make sure we're communicating the outputs of that. I am on a wonderful faculty senate subcommittee to help get the word out, and Kelly comes in with me and talks to them about, making sure that we're helping people with our communication about the importance of these types of initiatives, so that way people feel the improvements and experience them, because that's an exceptionally important part of this process, that people can understand this improved communication as a result of these efforts. So you can see some of these others, and I will pause on this so that way Kelly can cover this in greater detail. Other areas, research development, I'm really excited about this. Kim Mayer has done a fantastic job. I got to chair her search a few years ago and she's been awesome. I'm so glad to have our first research navigator. This is great. I'm so excited about all this wonderful work. And one thing we're pitching this afternoon is greater faculty engagement in federal agencies. We have a faculty involvement program already a little bit, and we really want to lean into this. It's didn't even make the list. It's so fresh off the page here. So we're pitching an idea with Julia Smith and Kim this afternoon for more faculty engagement and federal relations, that we need to actually train our faculty how to lean in more in federal agencies. And we're even proposing some of these ideas this afternoon to the associate deans. But these are building off of more opportunities for award coordination and other types of things. So this, in addition to the wonderful things that are articulated here, and even pitching the possibility of more research navigators and more opportunities for research development. Faculty support. The Shannon program is off and running. They already have their first cohort. I got to meet with them in December and talk about research development and opportunities for additional faculty development for that group. The entrepreneurship program is off and running. Mike Lennox already had a meeting in the quarter a few months ago talking about what's happening in that area. So it's great to be here at the Darden School and leveraging that opportunity for entrepreneurship. There's seed funding that's happening in all these grand challenges that we can leverage and build on. In fact, the deans are now hearing much more about grand challenges. Ian Baucom has brought the directors of the grand challenges into provost meetings, so they're learning much more about it. And the associate deans are talking more about grand challenges and how we can better leverage the SEEN programs. So lots of great stuff happening there. More investments in student support for top-offs or other kinds of flexible funding. There's more investment in the PhD Plus program. Phil Trella is doing a great work in that, a very data-driven program. Lots of great investments in the postdoc programs. They've done additional hires in that space. Additional funding for undergraduate research, particularly in the summer, and to be paired up with experienced faculty members in that space. Research cores, this is just a recap of what I had talked about before, but wonderful, great organization. And not just funding these cores and having them spin out, but there's actually an organizational structure for the cores to come together, and even a definition of what cores were. When we first had this group, Cheryl was organizing them. We didn't even have a definition of what UVA called research cores. So even that in of itself is a nice output of this effort. So lots of good work, and even the possibility of more cores coming, like around quantitative social sciences. So more great work coming in that space. So, and just to end here, talking about research computing, what we've invested in this space, some would argue is a drop in the bucket and that we need more work here, because every time you build something, it's kind of out to date by the time it gets set up. So we need more work in this space around research computing. So with that, I will wrap up and happy to take a question if you have it, or kick it over to Kelly. So maybe as Kelly's coming up, I'll take a quick question. Yeah.
Alex Gish, Research Director, Administration Director for SDS. We are going in again in May for our T32 submission that is aligned with iThrive.
Yeah.
And I raised this issue.
I think I remember you before asking, what are we doing about T32s and investments there?
So might I suggest that we have a research navigator that's devoted to T32s to break down the data silos that exist across grounds that make gathering the data for these proposals so difficult?
Yeah, I think I talked to Kim about doing like a session on T32 training. We can talk about that further, about how we can do better infrastructure development. I don't know if she has the resources to dedicate one navigator solely to T32s, but certainly building up our internal expertise in T32s, that would be great. I'll see her this afternoon, so I will follow up immediately with that recommendation. From one who's been punished by T32s in my prior work and working on several training grants. They're not T32s, but they're training grants now. So yes, I will follow up on that. I do remember you from before. Any other questions or suggestions?
Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you very much. Obviously, you can see I'm very happy.
still have to read your title.
Okay. I do too.
Our next guest is Kelly Hosteller. She's the Associate Vice President for Research Operations, Compliance, and Policy. She's going to be leading a couple sessions. She's first going to kick off with UVA-sponsored research investments, building off of Catherine's presentation. And then she and Erica Pretty are going to give an update on the conflict of interest, the Huron conflict of interest module that's being implemented. Kelly?
All right. Hello, everyone. And first, in case you didn't catch it, Catherine has led like every initiative related to research that's been going on lately. And so we can't underestimate how much she has contributed to moving the ball forward for all of us. So thank you so much for all of that work. So sure I can move forward here. Which is this one. Oh, okay. There we go. So I'm going to talk a little bit about SRII first. And so this is the same slide that you saw in Catherine's deck. So I wanted to talk through these in a little more detail. And the one that always jumps out to people and people ask me about is that bottom one, developing various options to potentially restructure OSP. That should really say research administration, probably not OSP, but it's really thinking about collectively across the university, how we together support research and research administration, right? So how do we work better across all of our various schools and central units? And then within OSP, how do we structure the work so it makes sense with our new systems in particular? So I don't want anybody to freak out about that. This is really just something that is long-term, looking to what's going to support us all best in the future. And of course, we have a new VPR coming in who will have their own thoughts on this. So trying to come up with options for them that they might want to consider as they come into that new role. So I always like to address the elephant in the room right up front. All right, so sponsored programs. As you all know, we have had some challenges in that area, keeping up with research growth, but also taking full advantage of our new systems. So part of what we really needed to do is invest in staff. We needed to bring in more staff. We needed to start giving our current staff the opportunity to continue to grow and develop their skills. And so there's been a great contribution by the Provost Office and the VPR's office to help us do that. So we've kind of put up the numbers here. So for the pre-award, we have 5, and I'm just going to call grants and contracts administrators, not worry about senior contract administrators. I'm not worried about titles. But on the pre-award side, 5 grants and contracts administrators kind of in that space, but then also 2 new positions to help support sub-awards. So this is in addition to Simon, who we brought in as the sub-award manager, and you all met last time, and also 2 existing positions that are being shifted over to focus on subs. So ultimately, we hope to have 5 people completely dedicated to working on outgoing sub-awards. So that's a huge investment in recognition of the importance of that function. Okay, so I think we still have a position open, right? So if you know anyone who wants to be a sub-award administrator, please have them apply. So I think that's, again, a recognition of the needs of the research community. We heard loud and clear that that is a pain point, and where we need to invest that additional resources and staffing to help support those functions. And the sponsoring agencies are certainly making it more challenging for us with the NIH requirements for international subs in particular. Contract negotiators, we only got 1 new position for this year, but that still is always a +1 for the contracts team. We also had to, of course, backfill for Bill's position when we promoted him to his associate director role. So that's backfilling that position was also a critical piece of filling in that contract negotiation team. Post-award, again, a couple of new positions for this year. We put I'm correct me if I'm wrong, a senior financial analyst in the compliance team, and then a senior accountant position in Gareth's team for reporting and accounting. And then for electronic research administration, we didn't have any for this year, but we do have 2 positions slated for them for FY25. Those will be really to help pull together data, help us take data out of those systems and be able to share it across the university. Alex, I'm talking to you. And really opening up that data to more people in a way that is well governed and where we're all talking about data the same way. And we all understand which data elements are critical to making those critical business decisions. So really helping to shore up that area as well. So additional support there. And then you can see in the orange on the other lines kind of what we're projecting for the next year for additional staffing in central sponsored programs. Here I talked a little bit about the internal restructuring component. So creating a team dedicated to the sub-awards, we talked about that a little bit. Creating an award setup team in Mary Beth's group. She's very excited about that opportunity. It's also allowing us to create a little more opportunity for staff development within the office. So people that can take on a supervisory role and own a piece of the process and really help them develop their skills in that space and hopefully build that career path here within the university. So that's an important part of this as well. It also means that we don't have 26 people reporting to Mary Beth. I think that's a good thing.
I agree.
So anyway, those are the types of restructurings that we think make sense and that we're going to go ahead and move forward with over the course of the next year. So we'll get some more direction from a VPR when they come in as well, but certainly doing some things internally that we think make sense for the group. Continuing to invest in systems, you're going to hear more about Huron, obviously, from me and Erica, but also in Workday and UBI. How can we better leverage those systems to help us do our jobs more efficiently, more effectively? So really now that they're in place and we are learning more about how to operate in them, how can we optimize them to really take some of that burden off so the systems are working for us and we are not working for the system? Okay, so that's all part of that process of bringing in a new system. It takes time to get there. Ongoing process improvement, I think I speak for everyone, not only in central OSP, but across the community of research administrators and compliance professionals. We all know that needs to be just a part of our day-to-day jobs now, and are committed to doing that. And we need to do it collaboratively so it benefits everyone and not just a narrow group of folks. So just to give you an example of some other things that are going on in my areas, the investments we've been making in OSP, we are also making in other areas like the Health Sciences Research IRB in particular. Staffing got really low during the pandemic period. And with the emergence of single IRB, we weren't really sure how much work was going to stay within the HSR IRB office and how much of it was going to be handled by single IRB. Turns out we still have to do a lot of work here when there's a single IRB. So we've really invested in staffing up that area as well. Heather Ferrari came in as the director at the end of July of 2023. Has a few core staff that have stayed with her. But we have brought in 8 new compliance analysts in the last, I'm gonna say 4 or 5 months. They are fabulous. They are experienced people that are really helping us to move the ball forward and start rethinking how we approach the HSR IRB processes internally and supporting our faculty more directly. So we have one more position that'll be coming soon in that space to be more of a coordinator to help the office overall. But then we'll hopefully be set for a little bit on staffing for that office, although we are planning for growth as the School of Medicine in particular wants to double clinical trials research in fairly short order. So we need to make sure that we have the capacity in the IRB office to handle that. There's also a reaccreditation. Our accreditation with AHARP is incredibly important for our biomedical research programs. So we are investing in a project manager to help us through that accreditation process and also to help us start planning for what do we need in the way of an HSR, particularly IRB system going forward. Long term, we would like to have both of our IRBs in a single system, but certainly the biggest need right now is on the HSR side. And so really looking at what systems support is going to best serve the IRB and the biomedical research community going forward. For those of you that don't know, we have a suite of systems right now that somewhat talk to each other, but not really. So the IRB staff spends an awfully lot of time on data entry and moving files from one system to another and having to double check and backfill. So we feel like a new system will help them to be more efficient and effective in doing their jobs, make it so much easier for our study teams to navigate the process, make sure they're using the right consent forms, making sure they have all the approvals they need. So huge gains that we think we can get with a new approach to our systems for sort of supporting the IRB. Dr. Stephen Caldwell has become the chair of the IRB. Rita Basu left the university in the summer, and Stephen Caldwell kindly stepped in and has assumed the HSR IRB chair position for us. So he is new and looking at things in a different way, and so we're happy to have him on board. And then one of the pieces of feedback we've gotten from our researchers is we need to add some expertise to the IRB, particularly in the area of electronic health and also AI, because there are more and more potential for the use of AI in research. It's been going on in the medical field for a long time, but a lot more exploration in how we can capitalize on the power of AI to help with our medical research and social behavioral sciences research as well. Internal restructuring, again, same idea, really looking at how we are structured as an office to support the IRB process. We went from having a director and one assistant director to now a director, and we have 2 associate directors. They're in interim positions right now. Hopefully over the course of the summer, as they've settled into those positions and we've brought the new staff on board, we'll be doing something similar with the structure where we'll have the staff actually reporting up to the associate directors rather than everyone reporting to Heather in the director role. And again, that's to create some accountability and responsibility aligned together to support those core functions. So, a little more internal restructuring to do there as we finish onboarding the new staff. Short-term system enhancements are absolutely under consideration. I don't want to say, oh, we're just going to come with some new approach in a couple of years. There's a lot we can do in the systems that we currently have, and so we're looking for all of those opportunities to get those quick wins that are going to be impactful to our study teams in particular, but also for the office staff. As I said, they're doing a lot of duplicate data entry right now. So really trying to narrow down what we are asking them to do to those things that are really critical and make the most of their time and efforts. Ongoing process improvement, you can just count on that being on every one of my slides very much. Some other areas of investment, and again, a lot of this is, we're putting it under the SRI bucket or umbrella. But I want to be really clear that the VPR's office and the Provost's office and the President's offices, they're pulling funds from a lot of different sources to help us support and improve the infrastructure underpinning our current research and to help us be scalable for future research. This is not just a bucket of funds that has been identified. This is really how do we pull funds from all of these different pockets and sources to really collectively support the needs of research infrastructure and researchers broadly. So I really want to make that point as well as I talk through some of these. But again, some additional investments that have been made. We've created a training group within the VPR's office. We haven't had that before. We've had trainers, don't get me wrong, in all of the different areas, but really bringing them together under Erica to try and start adding some cohesiveness so that it's a more comprehensive approach to how we do training and there's better connections between the various training programs. I think that'll be critical, and I'm really looking forward to working with Erica and the team on that. So you've met Stacy Kernison, I believe. We now have Marina Muchnick, I'll get it one of these days, in working with Erica. So really excited for what they're going to be able to bring to the community. The Office of Animal Welfare is also, we were down to one person in our Office of Animal Welfare office. Angie has been an office of one for some time. We are working really hard to change that as soon as possible. There are 2 positions out there. We're doing interviews this week for one of them and interviews next week for the other. So that's going to help us really make sure that as our animal research programs have grown, we're taking the steps that we need to assure compliance with those requirements and that we are respecting and treating those animal research subjects with the care that is necessary, not just to assure compliance, but also to assure the quality of our research. If you haven't heard me say it, I'm an animal researcher by training and practice. if you don't take care of the animals, your research is not of good quality. Those are inextricably interlinked. And so the Office of Animal Welfare is absolutely critical to the success of our animal research programs. So Office of Research Security, for those of you that don't know, Rob Jones was our National Security Program Director. He is now over the Office of Research Security. So he basically took all of the functions that were under me in my prior role. So export controls, controlled unclassified information, research data security, the research security program that's coming out from the federal government, all of that will be under Rob in addition to the national security programs piece. So we've added some staffing there to help meet those needs particularly as we start going into the research security program requirements that we expect to be published. Most recent estimate, and again, I'm always going to say it's the most recent estimate, is sometime in the second quarter of this year. That has shifted, 4 or 5 times as a target. And it's largely involving the cybersecurity elements that are an integral part of research security program requirements that have come out from the feds. So they're really working hard to make sure that they understand the scope and the implications for research institutions before they roll out those cybersecurity elements. They're very simple when you read them, but the implementation in an environment like a university is very complex, particularly when it's every IT system that supports federally funded research. So it doesn't matter if it's a system in an individual investigator's lab or an enterprise system. It's all subject to the same requirements. So they're trying to be really thoughtful about how they scale and scope those requirements. So on this particular case, I'm going to say I really appreciate the longer time frame because once they come into place, they're still saying it'll be a 1 year until we have to comply with those requirements. So be thankful for the time we have now and the thoughtfulness that they're putting into that project. So that's it for kind of my updates. Any questions about that? And then I will kind of switch gears to COI.
You talked a lot about the investments in IRB for the health side.
Yep.
I'm curious if there's any planned investments for the social and behavioral sciences side.
Absolutely. So we didn't see as quite as critical of a need, short-term need there, but absolutely. So one of the things that we found with our last accreditation visit was there's a perception by the accreditors that we have 2 human research protection programs, which should really be under one umbrella. So Marina, as the trainer, is going to be working with both groups to try and start bringing some of that stuff together, as will the project manager that we've hired to help with the accreditation process. So really trying to make it a more cohesive one, where we still have the separation of focus and expertise where it needs to be, but there's more alignment and more ease for people that do need to go back and forth between the 2 offices and systems. And as part of that, we'll also be looking at ways that we can better support the SBS side, both with systems, with training support, and communication strategies.
Thank you.
And then we'll look at staffing, of course, if that side of the research portfolio grows. We haven't seen the same trajectory there. And so right now we feel like we're comfortable at a staffing level, but certainly continuing to look at that. Other questions? Alex?
So I'm really excited to have the COI integration into Huron. I look forward to getting more training on how to better navigate
And-
that
and-
system.
FYI, they did not turn it on, the integration yesterday, it's today.
So I'm curious, I know that you guys are thinking about UFI as well.
Mhm.
Do you have any updates on whether that will be integrated so that we have kind of a seamless compliance monitoring?
Absolutely. So part of the research security program requirements from the federal government that we are waiting for include a training component that will replace our current undue foreign influence training requirement. There's also a training requirement in the CHIPS and Science Act that applies to NSF and certain other programs. So we're waiting to see how those, because we're gonna have to replace our undue foreign influence training. So we didn't want to build it into COI at the outset. The idea is that when we have that set new requirement, that training will be incorporated, so you'll have that seamless experience. We expect that that will be the NSF-funded programs that were developed and delivered a month or maybe 2 months ago, they released the 4 modules they created as part of the Research Security Initiative. That was a competitive NSF collaborative agreement or cooperative agreement that was released. A lot of our peers and colleagues at other institutions contributed to and developed that training content, and is now out there on the NSF website for anyone who wants to go and take a look at them or take those training programs. We think that'll be what the federal government sets as the final. And then we just need to worry about how we're going to incorporate it into our training programs, whether we make it one course. And if anyone here knows, I don't know what the recurring training requirement is on the new research security training yet. That'll have to be built in. So we are planning to include that. I also am hoping to be able to build in a process where we're pulling in the patent sign off into the COI system as well. So you really will have kind of one kind of compliance checklist for the training requirements, the disclosure requirements, and the patent sign off in one place.
Because I maintain a document about 5 compliance requirements for faculty, for our new faculty coming in. We want to build this into our onboarding process, that when new faculty come in, we're immediately training them on what their compliance requirements are. I just need to have the updated information to revise that and to talk with other folks in SDS about how we can onboard our faculty so that they understand from the get-go what their compliance requirements are.
And as soon as the feds tell me, I will tell you, Alex. So yeah, this is an evolving space, particularly in these trainings that are for all investigators and at least those that are federally funded, right? And so we're always trying to figure out what the right balance is of being an early adopter versus waiting a little while and letting things shake out on those requirements. So right now, we felt comfortable with where we are on the COI system rollout, incorporating the things we did. It is very easy to change that integration and pull in some additional content to be in that training piece for COI.
It's COI.
COI.
Is there a question in the chat?
Oh, is someone monitoring chat for me?
Uh,
If I'm monitoring chat, we're okay.
we need to,
Keep moving.
Yep.
Erica, you can talk about COI. Oh, I guess I had a couple, you had it, okay, so I had a couple of things. Most of you have heard these before from me, so I'm just gonna kind of throw them up there. There really were benefits for investigators as well as research administrators and for our VPR compliance staff. So I've highlighted those here. I won't go through them in detail now to kind of keep us a little closer to on schedule. The slides will be made available later. You're welcome to go through them. It's also on the COI website. And there have been some challenges, but we think it's still been to our benefit to do this gradual rollout and not subject faculty to an onslaught of notifications and requirements in a new system. And so far, everyone who's gone in and actually done their disclosure profile I have not heard one complaint about the process of going in, doing the disclosure profile. So I hope it is straightforward and seamless for them, in part thanks to Erica's work on the training content that was targeted for faculty. The resources are also included, so the email address for us and the conflicts of interest website has not changed, but the content has been updated. Now I'm gonna let Erica go.
All right, I'm just gonna go over some of the navigation in the system that might look a little bit new to you once it does go live. And there are gonna be some training guides, quick reference guides on the COI website under navigation and guidance for you. But we've got kind of 2 new areas. So we've got COI disclosure status and send to COI. The COI disclosure status is gonna always be visible on the proposal or award workspaces. It is not role dependent. The send to COI is visible on both workspaces as well, but only to the PI, administrative contact, and grant specialist. Just a couple of notes about those roles and who touches this throughout the process. So the administrative contact is really sort of that first touch point early in the proposal process. So as early as possible, checking that COI disclosure status and training and making sure those things are done. And then if the disclosure profile is blank or out of date, they can initiate send to COI early in that process, and that sends a system notification to those FCOI investigators to go ahead and complete those in the system. And so that's that first sent to COI interaction. Then you've got your senior admins. When they're reviewing the funding proposal, they can also check the disclosure status. Ideally, that'll all be up to date at that point. The ideal situation is that admin contact has already done that, already taken care of that, and made sure that is before sending it on. But if in that case, if the disclosure profile is still blank or out of date, they can initiate the send to COI as well. That triggers a notification for them to complete their update. Then as we get further into process along in later stages of the proposal and then the award stages, send to COI does some different things. So the pre-award assistants, if they're checking to COI disclosure status, again, that ensures that everything's up to date there. But once they initiate the send to COI, if they need to, that triggers notifications to those investigators to complete the update if necessary. But even if they've already completed their update, if send to COI is clicked at that point, it's going to add them to a research category if they're not already in a research category, and it's going to kick off that research certification. So research certification is new term, and it used to be the relatedness review. So just terminology switch there. Research certification is the new terminology here in the system. And then your award setup admin checks the COI disclosure status again, but this time they're checking it for the disclosure status. They're going to check the research certification. Obviously, training is still in there. Then there's going to be a management plan column as well. So they're checking all of these things at this point. They can send to COI if they notice something has not been previously done. And then your pre-award administrator during award mod. So the only really time that they're going to need to do anything for award modifications, this is a big process change, is if the modification is adding people. They'll be able to send to COI and it'll kick off all of those processes and checks for those investigators that are added, the new people, right? So it's going to kick off all those same things that were already done for the other people. So just some images here to get you used to what things look like.
It's always you, Erica, it's always you.
I know, right? When you click on check disclosure status, again, depending on where you are in the proposal or award phase, you're going to see the COI profile update, COI training completed, research certification status, and management plan status columns. Let's just talk real quick about when you're checking to see if that COI profile has been updated and training completed. A couple of things to pay attention to, at least right now. The dates of 126 and 127 of 2024 are dummy dates. Those are the dummy dates that were on Kelly's slide. These were what we pushed into the system so that everybody didn't get a notification at once when we went live. So if you see these dates, you'll still want to check the actual date in the UBI report. And then if it's out of date, you'll send an email to Ask Our COI and we can push that notification to them to update their profile. All the other ones, if it's blank or if it's over a year old, the send to COI that I was just talking about, that'll take care of that. But if you were to see 126, 2024 and hit send to COI, it's going to recognize that as not being out of date. So you're going to want to send something to askrcoi@virginia.edu. And then as Alex alluded to, the COI training right now in this system is only talking about the city COI training. So you're still going to want to look at that COI UBI report to see the undue foreign influence training status and the patent agreement status. All right, so again, a couple different options. I mean, the main option that we want you to go with is send to COI, or again, for those dummy dates, to send an email to askrcoi@virginia.edu. But you can also email people outside of the Huron system. I do think that the preferred method is going to be to send to COI. But again, just highlighting that the roles, administrative contact or grant specialists, are going to be the ones who see that. So if you're not in one of those roles and you have a need to do that send to COI action, one thing we talked about is that you could, if you have edit capabilities, you could assign yourself as the administrative contact just to do that action and then make the change back to the way it was. All right, the quick reference guide that'll be up on the website is going to cover this as well, sort of how to interpret this information. it's gonna have these definitions for you on that as well. So I'm not gonna read over all of them, but the research certification status has specific statuses that it will show. And so under review means that it is now being reviewed. No review required means that they finalize their review and determine that nothing is required, or requires management plan, then that's going to populate your management plan status column. If it does not require a management plan, then a blank in that column is okay because it doesn't require a management plan. And here are some of the other statuses that might show up: drafting, pending disclosure acceptance, active, or satisfied. And so really you're looking for that active or satisfied in that management plan status to see that it's like really good and good to go. And then just so you know, the award approver at the end of this process, if somehow one of these things are out of date, if the COI profile update is older than 1 year, if training is out of date, or if research certification status is in a state that's not no conflict or managed, they're going to get a warning. That's not going to prevent it from being activated, but they will get a warning, and ideally they won't see that because there are so many checks along the way to make sure that these things are done. I will be at Raptor office hours tomorrow to discuss this if anybody has any questions, but are there any questions at this moment?
Eric, I have one real quick. How does this look on the faculty end when they get the notification? And where I'm going with it is how likely are they to pay attention to the notification that their COI is out of date?
Yeah, so it does have a link that takes them directly to it. It does make it very easy for them to go and do this. Kelly might be able to answer a little bit more
Yeah,
on.
so as we're gradually kind of getting people into the system, they're getting an email from me first.
Uh-huh.
And then
Okay.
I'm kicking off the system notification, so they know to expect it. Like Erica said, not only is there a link directly to their disclosure profile, but there's also, I've embedded in the system generated email links to the COI website if they want to go and get the quick reference guide or the 2 short videos that are available to them there. And we've also explained to them in the message that the help center within COI contains those same resources for them. So far, we've had, I think, one person that got a little confused. But once we got them to the right resources, they were totally fine and able to navigate it themselves. So far, we've had really good feedback from the faculty that have been in the system.
And you've had pretty quick turn, like when you send it, they're doing it. You're not finding that you have to nag, you know?
Yeah.
Great, so hopefully that
So far, so
continues.
good. We know that piece is coming. But yeah, so and I just wanna say this too, so we're making a lot of changes to process, so I'm gonna be implementing some things where like quarterly, I'm gonna be checking for training statuses and pushing out reminders to people that are lagging, that maybe aren't frequent investigators in the system, and so may not be caught in these kind of ongoing new proposals and new award setup cycles. So we'll be monitoring that and making sure that we keep those current investigators up to date as well, even if they're not paying attention to those system generated emails. So there will be some checks and balances that'll be coming from the VPR's office in addition to the system. But I do think this is a much simpler user experience for the investigators.
And we'll set up a meeting for the submitting schools to kind of go over this in more detail to see kind of our side of it.
So the COI thing on the front end is making this process much faster. But in those instances where you need a management plan, are there any changes being made to speed up that process?
So yeah, so there are more of us that are going to be looking at COI disclosures and reviewing them. It also allows us to have an administrator who can reassign them, like if Rob Marriage is on vacation, which he is currently, we can go in and say anything that was assigned to Rob and reassign it to me or to Dave or to Mary Peace in the School of Medicine as needed. Ultimately, as we kind of are, like I say, gradually going into this, management plans will be in the system. Investigators will be able to directly link an existing management plan to a new award, so that can be reviewed more quickly as well. And then we'll be working with the COI committee to try and see what opportunities we have to speed up the process within the system for them as well.
That would be really helpful. We had a situation where a faculty member was getting a grant to do research for a company on which he also served as a scientific advisor, and that really slowed down the process.
Yeah, and so the one good thing about, so much of that is done in email right now. Having it in the system gives us a lot more visibility into when things are getting hung up. Because often when it's email, it's hung up between one of the COI committee members and the faculty member. And it's not apparent to us in the central office that we need to step in and try and provide some assistance. So this will give us that as we, again, start to continue to roll out the functionality.
So greater visibility will speed up the process.
Absolutely, and then also just process, I'm gonna go back, process improvement again,
Okay,
within the COI function too,
okay,
so.
that sounds really helpful.
All right, thank
Thank
you.
you so much.
How you doing, Dr. Epstein? How are you? Good. Good. So it's our pleasure to have Howard Epstein with us today. Howard is the Sidney P. Poole Professor and Chair of the Department of Environmental Sciences at the University of Virginia, specialized in the ecology of Arctic tundra, grasslands, and shrublands, and temperate forests. His research focus is on vegetation dynamics, nutrient cycling, and plant-soil atmosphere interactions. Dr. Epstein received his BA degree in computer science from Cornell in 1986. He received an MS degree in rangeland ecosystem science from Colorado State University in 1995 and a PhD in ecology from Colorado State in 1997. He conducted postdoctoral studies at the Institute of Arctic and Alpine Research at the University of Colorado. Dr. Epstein came to the faculty of UVA in 1998. He teaches courses in the fundamentals of ecology, terrestrial ecology, and ecology of grasslands and tundra. Dr. Epstein has published about 180 peer-reviewed journal articles and book chapters. He led the annual production of the Tundra Greenness Essay for the NOAA Arctic Report Card from 2012 to 2018, and he has contributed to several international reports, including the 2019 IPCC Special Report on the Ocean and the Cryosphere. He served on the board of directors for the Arctic Research Consortium of the U.S. from 2013 to 2019, and he was a co-lead of the Vegetation Dynamics Working Group for the NASA Arctic Boreal Vulnerability Experiment. There are a lot of syllables here. He is currently the lead PI of a large grant from the National Science Foundation navigating the new Arctic program to study the interactions between the built and natural environments in Utqiagvik,
Not bad.
Alaska. I actually practiced that.
Yeah.
He has regularly traveled to the Alaskan, Canadian, and Russian Arctic for field research. I'm so grateful to have you here.
Thank you.
UVA research is global in its impacts and its reach, and that is embodied by Dr. Epstein and what he's going to talk about today. Dr.
Thanks.
Epstein.
Yeah, thank you very much, and thank you for that introduction. So I'm not 100% sure why y'all invited me here. This morning I was thinking it's because that NSF grant that was just mentioned is currently undergoing an audit. Maybe that's why. I'm hoping that's not the case.
No, for the record,
Yeah.
the answer is no. That is not why we picked you.
Oh, okay.
So it's our pleasure to
Yeah.
invite faculty to these forums so that we can feel more connected to the research
Awesome.
that's going on at UVA.
That's great.
So that's
I
why
was
you
assuming it was not the audit. But I was also expecting a little bit more of an intimate environment. I didn't know there were so many of you all, but I'm happy to talk to you today. I will tell you that UVA has a very has a somewhat small but very vibrant, small in numbers of people, maybe not necessarily in dollars, but small in numbers of people, but vibrant both Arctic and Antarctic research communities. It's something that I hope to build here at UVA because we are a player. We're a player in polar research, believe it or not. We are definitely on the map when people think about polar research. They think about the work that we do here at UVA. So this could be a brain break for you. Like I'm just going to tell you about the Arctic and what it's like. So enjoy it. What am I pointing at to get this?
Straight ahead.
Everything freezes up.
That's right. You want to check it? No, it's not.
There we go. Just really quick.
There we go.
Perfect. Okay, cool. So I've given something similar like this through Office of Engagement, but the title that I've used in the past is What's Up with the Arctic. This is actually a photo from Siberia, northwestern Siberia. If I work right near where the prison where Navalny was. It's a small town called Kharp. And there's a prison there, and this actually, we got to this field site from Kharp, which is kind of, I don't know, interesting, nothing else, but so it's close to there, if you have any sense for where that is. It's northwestern Siberia. A lot of people think of the tundra as a barren, snow-covered, ice-covered wasteland. That's not true. It is during the winter, very snow and ice-covered. But it's a very lush environment. Okay, and the definition of the tundra is the absence of trees. But that doesn't mean it doesn't have woody plants. It doesn't mean it doesn't have high biodiversity, lush vegetation. This is the tundra. Okay, there are no trees there. Those are shrubs. They're alders, and they dominate that part of the tundra. Okay. So let's define the Arctic. A lot of people don't ever look at a map of the United States from above the North Pole, but this is what it looks like when you look at that. So the elements that we see in the Arctic is we have an ice-covered Arctic Ocean. At least it's ice-covered for now. I'll talk a little bit about that. The vegetation is tundra, which is the absence of trees, and boreal forest, which are the northern high-latitude forests that we find there. Underlying the Arctic is permafrost. Hey, is anybody watching True Detectives? Yeah, okay. So True Detectives is, it was filmed in Iceland, but effectively the model of the town is something similar to a community where I might work. They don't get everything right. The tunnel that they're in does not really look like what it would look like if you go underground. Anyway, permafrost. So the area is underlain by continuously frozen ground. Permafrost is frozen ground. It's not necessarily ice. It has ice in it, but it can be frozen soil. It can be frozen dead organic matter. It can be rock that's below 0 degrees Celsius. Anything that's below 0 degrees Celsius is permafrost. It's not necessarily ice, as that tunnel in True Detectives would have you believe. Pristine wilderness, okay, a lot of undeveloped areas in the Arctic, charismatic fauna, some of our major fisheries are in the Arctic, oil and gas production facilities are prominent in the Arctic. There are 8 nations that sit above the Arctic Circle. We are one of them. The United States is an Arctic nation because of Alaska. Indigenous peoples inhabit different areas of the Arctic, and 5 major world rivers run into the Arctic Ocean. In North America, they are the Yukon in Alaska and the Mackenzie in Canada. So there are different definitions of the Arctic. One good definition is the Arctic Circle. You can use some people use a temperature state to define the Arctic. Other people use the tree line, so anything north of the tree line is the Arctic, and then anything that drains into the Arctic Ocean could be considered the Arctic. So different definitions depending on who you talk to. The land of the midnight sun or the land of the midnight northern sun, depending on how far north of the Arctic Circle you are, will determine your how many days of dark and how many days of light you have. I'm a vegetation ecologist, so I'm there in the summer. I'm there when there's 24 hours of daylight. I actually don't think I've ever been anywhere in the Arctic with 24 hours of night, but often there with 24 hours of daylight. The Arctic Circle is that point above which, north of which, there is at least one day where the sun doesn't rise and one day where the sun doesn't set. And then the further north you go from there, the more dramatic that gets. So we'll talk about different elements of the Arctic. Sea ice is really important. Think of the Arctic as being really different from the Antarctic. They're both at our poles, but they're really very, very different beasts. The Arctic is an ocean surrounded by land, and the Antarctic is a landmass surrounded by ocean. And you can imagine that causes some very different things with respect to their climates. So the Arctic Ocean is, for now, largely covered by sea ice. This is a really nice image from NASA. You can see the Greenland ice sheet. And then you can see much of the Arctic Ocean covered with sea ice. The extent of this peaks in mid-March. So we're about 3 weeks away from the maximum sea ice that the Arctic will get. And then it will start to slowly melt, and it will reach its peak melt in mid-September. Okay, permafrost. So the entire Arctic tundra is underlain by permanently frozen ground, the tundra being the treeless area of the Arctic. And the top layer the top layer of ground is called the active layer. And that thaws every summer. So you can imagine that you get summer warm temperatures and the ground thaws and then gets to a point where the heat doesn't get there and it doesn't thaw anymore. And then in the winter it refreezes. So that top layer that thaws and refreezes, that's called the active layer. That's where all the plant roots are. That's where a lot of the activity, soil biological activity is. It's that layer right below the active layer, that's the top of your permafrost. So below the active layer is where that ground never thaws, never gets above 0 degrees Celsius. The geologic definition of permafrost is anything that is 0 degrees Celsius or below continuously for 2 years or more. So that's your geology definition of permafrost. So here you can see we have dug a soil pit, and you could see that the permafrost is sitting at about 60 centimeters below the surface. So depending on where you are, it'll thaw more deeply or less deeply, but it doesn't thaw very deeply at all. So, that's your active layer right there. Everything below that is permafrost. Permafrost can actually be really deep. It can go hundreds of meters down. And then ultimately it'll start getting warmer as you get close to the Earth's center. These are just some locations that I've been. I did work a number of years ago on the tundra, looking at tundra vegetation and soils along this latitudinal gradient going from Alaska all the way up the Canadian archipelago to some of the northernmost spots of the Arctic. Interestingly, Alaska doesn't even get you close. Like Alaska gets you barely to the middle of the tundra latitudinally. If you want to get to the high Arctic in North America, you have to go to Canada and the Canadian archipelago. This was an NSF-funded study from their biocomplexity project, 2002 to 2007. And every year we went further north. No one had ever done that really before. No one had ever studied the tundra vegetation all the way from its southern extent to its northern extent. And we did it twice. We did it in North America, 2002 to 2006, and then we went to Siberia and did it there from 2007 to 2012. I don't think my going to Russia will happen anymore. I think that that's going to be a big research gap for folks who study high latitude ecosystems. So here's the southernmost vegetation. It's totally lush, 100% vegetation cover, dominated by shrubs and grasses and sedges and mosses and lichens and other kinds of vegetation. So that's the southernmost. And then you go a little bit further north and it looks a little bit like a little more prairie-like. So that's probably the center of the tundra. And then you go even further north, and then it starts looking what people think what the tundra should look like. But that's only at the northernmost extents. And you can see there's a lot of barren area there. Those yellow flowers, I don't know if you can see them very well, you probably can't. It's hard to see on this, but those are poppies. Poppies are an Arctic plant species. So yeah, then but the growing season can be really short. Like this can be in the northernmost area, it might be a month. And the southernmost area might be 3 months. And then you've got 9 months of snow. I don't study these animals. I'm a plant ecologist, but they're really cool and they're there. I've been working in the Arctic for 27 years, and I just saw my first polar bear 2 years ago. Working in Ukjagvik, saw a polar bear out. It was out on the ice. It was some distance away with binoculars. You could pick it out. That was my first in-person experience with a polar bear. We're always prepared if we're going in areas where there are polar bears. We'll bring a guide, we'll bring a hunter with us, somebody to protect us. Sometimes we'll put an electric fence, which you can argue is not a very excellent deterrent for a polar bear, but we do it anyway. Bowhead whales, the community I work in, Utqiagvik, they subsist on bowhead whaling. Bottom right, caribou, just trivia, caribou and reindeer are the same species. Some of its terminology, North America, we tend to call it caribou. Over in Europe and Asia, they tend to call it reindeer. But then there's also a differentiation based on domesticity. So the domestic version of the caribou is often called the reindeer. And we don't do a lot of domesticated reindeer here in the United States any longer, but there's a lot of it over in Scandinavia and Russia. That's a musk ox at the bottom left. They're more they look like bison, but they're related to goats, actually. More related to goats than they are bison. They're grazers in the tundra. Both the caribou and the musk ox, they can forage right down to the ground level. During the winter, they push the snow away and eat the lichen off of the ground surface. They have really fine, beautiful wool. Their wool is extremely expensive. They're really neat animal. Okay. People, 40 or more ethnic groups, depending on how you define the Arctic, 4 million approximately people live in the Arctic. That town on the upper left there, that's Utqiagvik, Alaska. So it was formerly Barrow. They went back to the native name of Utqiagvik officially. It is the northernmost city in the United States. So it's right at the furthest north you can go in Alaska. And that to the left, that's sea ice. So that's the Arctic Ocean or the Chukchi Sea that hasn't yet melted or thawed yet. So but it's pure, it's beautiful sunny day. So I have to imagine it's spring sometime, where they're getting sunlight, but the Arctic Ocean hasn't melted yet. So I was standing sort of right where that road is on that bank where I saw my first polar bear out on the ice. They do come into town, and if you're working in town, you carry walkie-talkies, and they will alert you if there's a polar bear on the move, and you get in your vehicle and stay there until they tell you otherwise. The bottom right, those are Ninets, nomadic reindeer herders. They're on the Yamal Peninsula. That's the area in Siberia where I worked on that. Interestingly, that project, the first transect was funded by National Science Foundation. The one we did in Russia was funded by NASA. NASA's Land Cover Land Use Change program. If you don't know, NASA funds a lot of Earth science research. The stipulation is that you use some kind of Earth observing platform. It doesn't even have to be one that doesn't have to be a NASA satellite. You just have to do some kind of Earth observing. It can be drone based, and NASA would entertain funding it. So we got funded by Land Cover Land Use Change for I think it was 9 years. I think we got three repeats on that. Energy production, the Prudhoe Bay oil field at the top left, it's the largest in America, operation since the 70s. It's still going. It's well past its peak, but it's still producing oil. On the Yamal, it's more of a natural gas region. I think it's probably the biggest provider of natural gas to Europe. That area on the Yamal, that was in development when I was there, 2000 and I think 8 or 9. But it went in production in 2012. We actually stayed at the facility one year. We were working nearby. The Nenets, their migratory routes go right through it. They just built the gas field right in the middle of a migratory route for the Nenets. So if I didn't mention, the Nenets are nomadic, so they move north and south with their reindeer herds on an annual basis. They move north in the summer and go back down south in the winter. Okay, so a few slides on what's up with the Arctic. you may have heard the Arctic is changing rather dramatically. It's changing more dramatically than anywhere else on the planet, arguably, probably. These are some graphs of global temperature changes and Arctic temperature changes since the 1900. The x-axis is years since 1900. The y-axis is difference from a mean, so don't take those as absolute values. But you could see that starting right around the late 1960s, 1970, Arctic temperatures just skyrocketed. Okay, they got really warm really quickly, much more dramatically than you see for the globe as a whole. The one estimate, depending on how you slice that graph, Arctic temperatures could be increasing 4 times as much as the average, as the global average. So since 1900, about 3 degrees Celsius, which is about 6 degrees Fahrenheit increase for the Arctic, compared to we're close to about 1.5 degrees for the globe as a whole. And there are positive feedbacks that cause this reasons why the Arctic is warming faster than other places. Really nice website if you're interested is NOAA's Arctic Report Card. It's an online set of essays that get put out every year about what's going on in the Arctic. Sea ice is declining dramatically. That graph on the right is the Arctic Ocean sea ice extent since the late 1970s. And the reason it goes back to that period and not before is that's when our satellite record of this, that's when we're able to capture the extent of the Arctic Ocean via satellite. And the black line is the winter extent. So that's the peak, that's the maximum. The red line is the summer extent. You can see they're both declining, but the summer extent is declining a lot faster than the winter extent. And what caught everyone's attention was 2007, because it was a huge drop. It just like, boom, we just lost a whole, million or so square kilometers of ice in between 2006, 2007. 2012 was the record low. And you can see, but since 2007, it looks like it hasn't changed a lot over the years, but in year to year, it's bouncing around. I don't think we have any reason to believe that it wouldn't continue to go down at some point. Snow cover is also declining. That's probably the second most dramatic thing that's happening in the Arctic, particularly the spring snow cover extent. So even though the hydrological cycle in the Arctic is actually getting faster, so it actually might snow more with more snow depths, but that snow is then melting faster in the spring. So even though we might have more snow, greater snow depths, it's melting fast. And by May or June, there are a lot of areas that don't have snow cover that did have snow cover. And well, you can imagine, so there are certain implications of that happening. One thing I will tell you that I have not yet mentioned about the Arctic is that it doesn't get a lot of snow. It's actually a very low precipitation area, because if you have a really cold environment, the atmosphere can't hold water. So it doesn't snow a lot or rain a lot. But once it does, it doesn't melt. So once you start the snow, it'll just hang around for 9 months until the temperatures get warmer. So a place like West Virginia, you get 4 times as much snow as places in the Arctic. It's just not a lot of precipitation, but it doesn't disappear once it gets precipitated. Permafrost, I think I talked to you all about it. It underlies more than 20% of the northern hemisphere. It can be hundreds of meters deep. That active layer is the ground above the permafrost that thaws every summer. It can be tens of centimeters to a few meters deep. Permafrost is warming. We have we have a nicely extensive network of boreholes. So these are deep holes that are drilled into the ground with temperature sensors all along the depth of these holes. I think we're looking at hundreds of those now around the Arctic, a few hundreds. Thank you, 5 minutes. So permafrost is getting warmer. we should care about this when it's getting close to 0 degrees Celsius. If it goes from -14 to -12, maybe not such a big deal, but there are areas where the temperature of the upper permafrost is close to 0. If that gets above 0, the ice fraction of the permafrost will melt and the ground, things will subside and the ground becomes unstable, particularly for people who live, bad for people who are living in the Arctic. The active layer is also getting deeper, so it's thawing deeper and it's getting warmer. Thawing permafrost can cause things like this, ground slumping, coastal erosion. I'm gonna go a little bit more quickly. Permafrost stores a lot of carbon. That's because things don't decompose very fast in the Arctic because it's cold and wet. And I know I said it doesn't have a lot of precipitation, but there's nowhere for the precipitation to go once it does precipitate. The permafrost protects it from going down, and the air is cold, so it doesn't get evaporated. So even though low precipitation, it's still a pretty wet place. And so when you have low temperatures and wet environments, things don't decompose very quickly. And so the Arctic is a wonderful storage for carbon. Permafrost soils currently hold about twice as much carbon that's in our atmosphere. The gloom and doom scenario, which is not predicted, is if we thaw all the permafrost and all that carbon goes back to the atmosphere as CO2 or methane, that would triple the amount of carbon in our atmosphere. The projections are something like 10 to 15% of that over the next century. This is the work that I do, finally, in the last 3 minutes of the talk. But I don't know, I thought I'd give you an overview. I study the vegetation, so I'm looking to see what's happening in the vegetation in the Arctic, and it's getting greener. It's just getting greener. This is not necessarily a wonderful thing. The fact that the vegetation in the Arctic is becoming more productive and will take up carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, it's a minor fraction of what we're putting into the atmosphere every year. So it's not our savior, not in the Arctic and not anywhere else in the globe if the vegetation is getting greener in response to warmer temperatures and more carbon dioxide. One of the ways we looked at this was we used spy satellite imagery from the 60s. This is really cool. It was declassified by Presidents Clinton and one of the Bushes, first Bush. And so we have satellite imagery over Siberia and other places too. So here's an area that we looked at in Siberia, and you can see this was in the 1960s. And then you take a commercial satellite image in the 2000s, and you can see what's going on. So the vegetation, this is a lot of what I'm working on. What are the implications of this for Arctic ecosystems? That's the vehicle that we took from HARP to get to our field site. That is a recommissioned Russian tank called a Vyezdechod, which I think means goes anywhere in Russian, if anybody knows Russian. That's me with my graduate student in the red. His name is J.J. Frost, kind of nice name to have as a researcher. And three Russian scientists. So I am about done, but just maybe on this slide, we have this new project examining the interactions between the built and natural environments in Utqiagvik, Alaska. This is a large grant for us. It's a $3 million, 5-year NSF Navigating the New Arctic, working across 4 schools at UVA, arts and sciences, engineering, data sciences, and architecture. So this is a beast of an award with 1, 2, 3 or 4 subawards. But it's a good one. I mean, it's great, obviously. We're very happy to have it, and it's a different project for me because I'm working in a community for the first time, like really deeply working with community partners on helping them figure out how climate change and the infrastructure affects the ground underneath them and other environmental conditions like water quality and air quality. So I had a few more slides on this, but you know what? I'm going to stop there. I don't know if questions are okay or we have to move on. But anyway, thanks. I hope you kind of enjoyed that.
Thank you, Dr. Epstein. I think we have time for a couple of questions.
Okay.
Jeff.
Why don't trees grow up there?
That's an excellent question. The growing season's not long enough. Trees are fine in really cold temperatures, but they need a long period of time to balance, to maintain their carbon balance, because the wood is expensive. So the wood, when vegetation is not actively photosynthesizing, they're respiring, they're breathing just like us. So they're losing carbon at all times. So they need a long enough growing season to capture enough carbon to balance out the carbon that they lose over the winter, and just not a long enough season. The other thing is permafrost. Like, there are trees, that handle permafrost okay. So like black spruce and white spruce, they can be really shallow rooted, but other trees are prevented from rooting any more deeply than a meter because the permafrost is down there. Yeah.
Maybe this is the research administrator in me, but I'm interested in what percentage of the time do you have to be on the ground in the Arctic versus in your lab here at UVA?
Yeah, this is a tough one because we should be there more than we are. In this particular project, we need to be there more than we are. And we go in the summers because we're not teaching and taking classes, graduate students and undergrads. So we go in the summer, we do a couple of trips, usually for a week at a time, but depending on the different part of the project, I have two graduate students working on different things, so one might be there at a different time than the other one. But we're trying to maintain a lot of equipment that's taking measurements all year round. We're not doing it sufficiently, and the idea of this project is to co-produce it with local partners. That's a really hard thing to do, I'm finding. It's a great goal, but it's hard. So to find somebody there who can help, who can maintain, the equipment, adequately maintain the equipment, it's really hard. So we're struggling with that.
So, as I'm sure you're very well aware, the Arctic is becoming an increasingly contested space in terms of the geopolitics of everything. And as navigability increases, that's just going to become more of an issue. How does that impact your research?
How does it impact our research? Well, the environmentalist in me says this is not a great thing, right? That things are changing in such a way that that the Northwest Passage is open and navigable and has cruise ships going through it. This can't be good for the environment. I think one of the big things that I mentioned is the political situation with Russia, and how a lot of European and North American scientists had worked in Russia, and I don't think that's done. That's effectively done. I do have a couple of Russian colleagues, and we work together over Zoom on some things, but we're not going to the field there. And the Russians are not doing it. They're not doing this. They're not doing the science that could be done. So that's a big gap. But I will say about openness, the one irony is that the reason we know so much about the tundra, or we learned so much about the tundra starting in the 1970s, was the Prudhoe Bay oil field. And that the road, there's only one road that goes from interior Alaska to the north slope of Alaska, and that's the road that goes up to the Prudhoe Bay oil field. So everything we know, everything we learned early on about the tundra is because of that road and because of the access. So everyone's field sites were all along the road. So some things make things more accessible to scientists in addition to other people. But again, the environmental aspects of it are not going to be great. Particularly, the ports are going to be built, and different countries are going to care more or less. So,
I had What? I had a question, but it's okay.
Oh, yeah,
We're
we-
at time.
It's been great to have you
Okay,
here. Thank you so very much.
Yeah, you're very welcome.
Hey, Bill.
Oh, I thought I was just gonna jump right in. So do you have a long introduction for me?
No, I don't. But just real quick, I again, I want to express my gratitude for Dr. Epstein being here, and I was serious. I think one of the privileges we have in this community is to be connected to people who are doing research differences in the world, and that was a powerful presentation. That's a really good reminder of that. So, yeah, that was fantastic. All right, so our next presenter, our next guest is Bill Scholler. He's an associate director for the pre-award team. He oversees the outgoing subaward operations, among other things. And he's going to give an update on subaward trends, et cetera. Thank you, Bill.
I can thank you, Stuart. I can confidently say this will be nowhere near as interesting as the last presentation. We met last RAF to talk about the NIH requirements for foreign subawards. So we want to just do a real quick update on that, on where we stand with that, particularly because we have a deadline approaching March 2nd for that to be implemented. So just a quick overview in terms of where we've come from a couple different iterations of the requirement from NIH. And again, this modifies the grant policy statement requiring prime recipients to have access to copies of all the lab notebooks, all data and documentation, no less than once per year, in alignment with the RPPR process. Again, we have a deadline of March 2nd to amend all of the foreign subawards. And I think we're pleased with our progress so far. We have 18 out of our 28 existing impacted foreign subawards. And so this went through a process of reviewing each existing project, doing a number of rounds of information gathering with each of the PIs and their department staff, as well as doing subrecipient monitoring depending on the state of the subaward. So it was certainly no small task. And we have 10 amendments that are out with 6 different subrecipients where we're still waiting on them to sign. But given the tall order, we're pleased with where we are, and I think we're on good track to meet that deadline. We looked closely at some of the model language that NIH had provided. We made a few small tweaks to it to make it a little more flexible, particularly as we looked at the technical solution that would work best for our researchers. We wanted to essentially reference that technical solution, which is Globus, but then also allow for other file transfer mechanisms that may be applicable depending on the foreign subrecipient. They may not have the capabilities to access Globus, or depending on the data that's being sent, it may be as simple as just forwarding some emails that need to get sent, and Globus isn't the appropriate mechanism. So we added some flexibility to our language. We certainly had some pushback from some institutions, and we've been working with our colleagues at other institutions through FDP to talk, particularly a lot of the EU institutions. We've seen some pushback. Luckily, we've not had any major hurdles thus far, but that'll be a challenge on the horizon, I think. As far as the technical solution that we've developed, we've been working with colleagues in Josh Baller's group, Research Computing, as well as Rob Dethorn for the storage backup and archive team in ITS, and Kelly's been sitting in on those meetings as well. And they have come up with, like I said, this Globus technical solution, which will involve giving a link essentially to the foreign subrecipient to effectively create like a Dropbox where they can drop their data. It loads it into a secure intermediate site that then gets dropped into a archive repository, basically, because we not only do we need to have access to their data, but we need to meet NIH data retention requirements. And so we effectively have to hold on to their data in a read-only state so that our PI can sign off on the RPPR and view the data in that read-only state. And so Globus is designed for large data set transfers, and that was what what Josh Baller had suggested to use, and we think that will effectively cover most instances. But again, what we found is each project, depending on what research they're doing, what data they're collecting, each one really has to be looked at individually and considered individually. And so we've built in some flexibility that allows us to not use Globus if it's not appropriate. The cost for using Globus right now, it looks extremely low, de minimis, as long as we're not dealing with large data sets over 1 terabyte of storage data. And the examples that they've given us are complex, 4-dimensional imaging files, for example, genomic data potentially that are going to have very large data storage requirements. That could be a long tail challenge as far as the potential cost for meeting the NIH data retention requirements. But thus far, none of our subawards have really met that threshold, and so we think that the cost of this can essentially be absorbed at the central school level. We've been working directly with PIs to develop a data survey to basically understand those needs and what sort of system and technical solution we need to build in as a result of each project's data. And we are working on a March rollout for that Globus technical solution, which will then be provided to the subrecipients. And so you can think of it as sort of 2 different pieces to the project, where you have to meet the NIH requirement to amend the subawards, but then you, practically speaking, have to have the mechanism to actually store the data. And so we met with the technical team. They were working on their specs and expected to have that ready for an early March rollout. So just a summary on some of the communication, and then in particular some of the revised forms and language that's come out of this project. Like I said, we've done emails to all the units, to impacted PIs, to all of the subrecipients at the institutional level. We are working on a OSP webpage that's focused on this issue. I guess more broadly, I should give a plug that in general, we're looking for some more subaward specific content, both from the external subrecipients perspective in terms of why are we requesting all of the documents that we're requesting, because occasionally particularly for smaller subrecipients that don't have a lot of experience, they have many questions in this area. But also from the perspective of internal users, folks in the departments and units, understanding some of the information that OSP needs to gather for subawards so that we can streamline that process of requesting a subaward and turning it around, getting to the point where we're ready to execute the subaward itself. So we have some additional content that will be coming out on in the near future on the OSP webpage. Be on the lookout for that. I've already mentioned the amendments to the subawards themselves. Simon worked on revising the consortium commitment form to include the NIH requirement that the foreign subrecipient will accept the requirements. We produced the LOI language in the fall, and I know I think Lauren references that in the School of Medicine website. So those should be available for folks at the proposal stage. I already mentioned the data survey for impacted subawards. So essentially, whenever we see a subaward that comes in that's NIH funded and is a foreign subrecipient, we will provide that data survey to the PI to get a better understanding of what data is impacted and how we can set up a technical solution to get the data appropriately to UVA. Collaborated with Lauren on revising the School of Medicine RPPR form that includes now a PI certification if there is a foreign subaward, that the PI is then certifying that they have checked and confirmed that the data supports the conclusions from the RPPR. And then research computing has some good details on how to use Globus that we can provide to subrecipients when they're being called upon to essentially drop their data periodically into this technical solution to then get updated to a UVA server and retained to meet the project requirements. Okay, last slide, just a couple best practices I want to emphasize to everybody at the proposal stage. If you are getting any pushback from your foreign subrecipient, please reach out to OSP. Particularly local data privacy laws may complicate some of the data transfers. And if we are able to spot any of those issues at the proposal stage, all the better. And then lastly, just one of the things that we've encountered with PIs is emphasizing that this NIH requirement is independent of any of the data flows that are resulting as a result of the project. And so frequently PIs have been saying, well, we've already got the data because of the project, but they're two separate requirements, and we need to be mindful of that in how we're setting up our technical solution. That's all I have. Any questions?
So I'm in the process of getting a new, or requesting a foreign subaward from NIH. Is there anything I can provide to them now? Is it out on the website rather than?
So the revised consortium commitment form, the letter of support language, you're in submitting a proposal.
No, it's actually a funded grant that he wants to extend we're asking NIH for permission to add a foreign sub.
I think maybe.
So when that's set up, you guys are gonna incorporate all this?
Yeah, I mean, when you get to the stage of requesting the subaward to OSP, then we'll reach out with a data survey to the PI. I would say the guidance for now would be get it on the PI's radar to make sure that they're thinking about some of these issues, particularly the concept about, well, I'm going to have access to some data because of the project, in order to perform the project. But the other mindset needs to be that NIH's requirement is basically any data that supports any of those subrecipients' conclusions needs to be funneled through to meet this requirement. And so I think that's
Go through the Globus.
Yep, and that's the key thing, just to sort of like put into the PI's head, because that's been coming up a lot when we're having these discussions with PIs. And also reach out to OSP, where I'm happy to chat with you offline.
All right, thank you, Bill.
Yep.
All right, our final presentation is going to be Irmela and I think Mike Pretty, is that right?
Yeah.
Talking about workday improvements, PAC implementation, and audit updates, so.
Do we have?
And I'll give everyone a heads up, we're probably gonna run about 5 minutes long, I guess, does that sound about right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm going to go a little fast because a lot of this information, you already are aware of, but this is what Stuart wanted us to talk about. What are the enhancements with business processes and reporting we have done after listening to the field? So I want to start off by saying that post-award people are working, collaborating very closely with the finance team, finance support team, and reporting team. And we are also, included in Workday user group with different universities. We are considered an important partner with Workday Design Partner Group. So we are trying to do as much outreach as possible to learn, the best practices and probably make some improvements within our process flows. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the reports that we have in Workday and UBI ClickSense. So Find My Awards for PIs and grant managers is, it's an old report. It's not a new report, but it is very useful. I don't know how many of you are using it for your PIs. Then there is also another report that actually Kelly worked with Mark Anderson's team, Award and Grant Assigned Roles Audit Report. Then there is a new report, FDM Grants Allowed Spend Category. So when your department administrator is going in and trying to enter a transaction and the transaction bounces back, errors out because the spend category is not allowable and or the grant is on spending on hold. So you can actually see the status of all these things through this report. So this is a brand new report that our IT team has given us. Then there is an FDM reference grant report. This is also another new report and it's very interesting. You can run it for your department, for your cost centers, for your PIs. And then the payroll distribution report, we can only talk about it. I can't, unfortunately, have a demo of that report. But we are reaching out to School of Medicine and the other schools and showing them how to get access to that report and and it's a simple research administration dashboard report. So it's really not complex and there is a lot of good information about your payroll allocation, costing allocations in this report. So this is your Find My Awards report for grant managers and PIs. And this is a Workday delivered report, but modified by our great, finance reporting team, Mark Anderson's group. So this one is your Award and Grant Assigned Roles Audit Report. And I just wanted to check how many grants and awards do we have before I came to this presentation, and how many, are missing the award or grant PIs. So I wrote down the numbers real quick. There are 72 grants with missing PIs in the current state. And there are about 56 awards with missing lead PIs. So, once in a while you can always, Melissa, sorry. Thank you. You can run this report and see if you need to assign somebody as the PI or assign somebody as, the grant manager or grant financial analyst. So this is a great report for all of us. This is the FDM Grants Allowed Spend Category report. This is the output, how it looks. I know it's very tiny. I didn't realize it's going to be this small. But basically it gives you, you can pull it up by your grant ID and it gives you your grant name, your grant hierarchy, and then life cycle status, and also the allowed spend categories on this grant. Then there is the FDM reference grants report, and this is where I just ran it by grant hierarchy and I selected subaward grant hierarchy, GRH 006. And then this is the output I got. It gives you all the grant information and it also gives you all the different grant roles. So this is one of the newer reports. Now I'm going to hand over to Mike. Where's Mike? If you want to talk about the improvements you have made with business processes.
Yes. Thank you very much. And I'll be super quick on these as well. So we had a F&A credit issue with payroll accounting adjustments, where payroll accounting adjustments after our grant end date, when those would occur, the F&A for the fringe credit was not applying correctly. So we had to end up working with Workday and with other universities to see how they were handling the situation. And apparently it's a tenant level setting checkbox that we had to address. And so working with Gareth's team and testing the scenario out in Sandbox, we've checked this box out and we're no longer having this F&A credit issues. And Garrett's team has also been going back through reprocessing those awards so that our FNA looks good in these scenarios. We created an administrative exception reason code for accounting adjustments and for payroll accounting adjustments. There are a drop-down list of reason codes when you're submitting these adjustments. And in instances where maybe there was a delay internally, potentially just like getting the grant set up, you can use that administrative exception reason code to bypass the retro questionnaire requirement and the PI approval process. Let's see. The next item is removing the grant invalidation for payroll costing allocations. This is a relatively new item that we have been testing quite a bit and that was recently released in the last couple weeks. Beforehand, when you're setting up essentially a labor schedule involving a grant, you had to have an end date. Going forward, you will no longer be required to have an end date with a grant related to payroll cost allocations. That's been the feedback. But here are just some things to keep in mind. Payroll obligations will either go out to the grant end date or they will go out to current fiscal year +1, whichever is sooner. You are still required to have 100% payroll allocation at all times, but you can leave it open-ended. You can leave it, you can create an end date beyond the grant end date. So we're hoping that's gonna alleviate some administrative.
And we tested, the actual transaction will not get posted on the grant if the grant has ended.
Correct, it'll go to your suspense account.
Is there gonna be a communication about that? Broad
Spotlight report this week. Spotlight report this week, yeah.
Mike, it's only the grant that ended will hit the suspense or the whole allocation?
So if your budget, so let's say that you've got faculty payroll 7/25 to 8/24, grant ends on 7/31. You've allocated your end date on your costing allocation beyond that time frame of 7/31. If your budget date of 8/24 hits, it's going to go to your suspense instead of to the grant.
But just that one line in the
Just the
payroll
grant
cost?
portion or the rest?
So if
Just
you
the
have it
grant.
allocated to
Yeah,
three
so if you-
different things.
Yeah, so any allocation you have to a grant, if your end date goes beyond the grant end date, it's going to post to your suspense account.
That line of the
Just that
payroll
line.
cost.
Just that
allocation.
Just that line, right?
Okay.
All the other grants will continue to allocate within that.
I'm gonna skip all the way back to.
Good deal. Another item is the fund hierarchy for cost share and salary over the cap. Prior to this implementation, this isn't new news to a lot of folks. But you had to go in and you had to provide either the pre-award team or myself the work tags that you wanted to use for cost sharing or salary over the cap. Working with central finance, we came up with a list of commonly used funds for cost sharing, institutional funding for cost sharing, and we created a fund hierarchy. So now when the pre-award team is creating salary over the cap grants or cost share grants, we are putting that fund hierarchy as an allowable work tag up front. So this is eliminating all of that back and forth from our email communications and things of that nature. So we're hoping that's a big win. And of course, if we miss something, just email us, we'll get it in there real quick. And then the last couple items is regarding payroll allocation confirmation system. This is our new PAC system that replaced the effort reporting system. I know most of you know who work with me that we have created reporting for salary over the cap. But effective this reporting generation that just went out yesterday, there's now a new indicator that's green or red. If it's red, you haven't not allocated enough salary for over the cap. If it's green, it's green, you have. If it's red, you haven't. But you can hover over the indicator and it will tell you how much you need to allocate over in a percentage basis. We've worked with Huron to test that for UVA. And I think so far the feedback's been positive.
I have a question about that. If we're doing salary over the cap on the UPG side, I'm having a really hard time finding a report that actually shows me the payroll that's on the UPG side. So if I need to do an adjustment, I can't give them a report, say adjust this, because I can't find it.
Yeah, so we are actually working on that payroll allocation distribution report that Ernbla was pointing out to. Currently, it only pulls in academic salaries, but we just got permission, I think it was a week ago, that they're gonna unmask the UPG data for our data warehouse. So we will be able to provide a better report for you.
Yeah, I also have another situation. I'll talk to you offline.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you.
This is great.
I think we can cover audit or?
So quickly, audit, we got our APA audit report for R&D cluster. Our APA audit is very clean. And the UVA's audit for single audit under the Commonwealth is posted in our website and also in APA's website. So if you want, you can go and check it out. And then NSF is doing an audit right now of one particular grant, and I think, we are good on that too. So that's the audit scenario right now. There is one more. Oh. I didn't want to talk about it because it'll take time.
All right, well, we'll figure that out. So just quick preview for the May meeting. We're really excited about it because we're gonna fly in all of our remote workers that week and have them spend a full week there. And so it'll be an opportunity to really have the entire office be here in person and meet you and have interactions. So it's gonna be a super week. Rita?
Yeah, Wrath, it'll be May 14th, it's a Tuesday, and it'll be in this room, so we'll have them here.
Yeah.
So, those of you. Yep, full house.
As always, I'm grateful for y'all and for your attendance here at RAF. Want to make sure I speak to those joining us online. It's your participation that makes these meetings successful. And on behalf of OSP, thank you for being here, and we'll see you in May. Take care.
Thank you.